Welcome back to another episode of the B2B Founder Podcast. I'm your host, Brett Trainer. Today, I welcome podcasting legend Jeremy Slate to the show. Jeremy is the founder of the Create Your Own Life podcast, which studies the highest performers in the world. His show has been downloaded over 2.5 million times, specifically in the iTunes 100, and at one point was the number one rated news show on iTunes. He also studied literature at Oxford University, was a competitive bodybuilder, now specializes in using podcasting as a new media to create celebrity. The bottom line is Jeremy understands the power of podcasting, both hosting and guesting. The goal of any B2B founder is to expand and strengthen your company's reach and awareness. In today's episode, we discuss how guesting and podcasts is an excellent public relations and maybe more importantly, a business development tool. Jeremy teaches us a mini masterclass on how to get on podcasts and then how to leverage them. We cover all the do's and don'ts to get maximum value. If you're looking to grow your business and you're not guesting on podcasts, this is the episode for you. Enjoy, and now on to the interview. Hey, Jeremy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, I am stoked to be here, Brett. Always great to get a chance to hang out with you. I know we were talking a little baseball before we got started here, and I just, add a little value to your audience today, man.
There's no doubt of it. I've been a big fan of your work for a long time, so I'm glad we could get the schedules aligned and get you onto the podcast. And, initially, I think some of my audience be like, wow, B2B founders, why do I care? You have a podcast legend. I'll call you a legend on the show.
And thanks, man. I'm a legend in my own mind. That's about it.
At least that's what your wife says, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, so thank you for being here. To get started, why don't you share just a little bit how you get started in the B2B startup space? I know you do a lot of different things, but just kind of curious how you kind of ended up here.
Yeah, so my master's degree is in early Roman Empire propaganda. So I was going to teach college. I didn't end up getting into that PhD program. So ended up teaching high school, did that for a couple of years. My mom ended up having a really bad stroke, and it kind of made me look at my career path and what I was doing and everything else. So I tried starting several companies since 2012 until like 2015. Every single one of them did not work and failed pretty quickly. I racked up something called credit card debt. I'm sure anybody listening to this has never heard of that before.
Never.
So I was, really kind of backing up against the wall. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to create something valuable, I need to kind of, get something to pay the bills in the time being. So I ended up actually teaching myself how to build websites from watching YouTube videos and reading blog posts and like, CSS and HTML. So I ended up working at a friend's marketing firm why I kind of built this podcast, and it took off, and we had 10,000 listens in our first 30 days. And we had a lot of businesses saying, hey, like, I really need help getting to my target market. I really needed help getting in front of people. So like, all right, cool. We'll create this product called a podcast in a box. I had never hired anybody before at this point in time. So like, basically I was going to do everything. And so what I was doing was building people's websites. I was putting together social media. I was booking their guests. I was editing their podcasts. I was doing their graphic design. Like, as you can see, there was way too much as a part of this. And we had several really happy clients. But once again, I mentioned that credit card debt. I was even more broke than a joke here because I was, taking on more debt to even like do these projects. I wasn't making money. And clients were like, hey, like, we really appreciate what you're doing for us. But the point that really makes sense and is really helping us get in front of our customers is being on other people's podcasts. Like, I don't really want to run a show. I'm not really interested in doing that. So, that's where the idea for Command Your Brand came from. And we've really been helping people, whether it's in a B2C area or in a B2B area, to get in front of their target market for the last 4 years. And we've been having a lot of fun doing it, man.
Got it. That's awesome. And I think some people are just now discovering podcasts. I was a little bit late to the game. It was about 2 years ago where I was a guest on my first podcast, and it was a lot of fun. And my whole journey was, hey, I was going to write a book. I've been in the industry a long time, it is 30 years now. And so I thought that was a great idea, share my wisdom. I always wanted to do it. And the editor's like, well, you should start a podcast because, then you can get a built-in audience. You've got a platform. I'm like, I don't know shit about podcasting, right? So, I mean, how hard could it be? And I think, I wrote about it not too long ago. The hardest part was hitting record for the first time.
Yeah.
And now 75 plus episodes in, it's almost a way of life. And I love to do this. And I know there's folks now just discovering podcasts, and you probably know the stats better than I have. And so the people that do listen to podcasts will completely appreciate what you've accomplished with yours. Just that the first 30 days is remarkable. And I'd say 98% never get to that
Yeah.
period. And we'll talk about your podcast at the end of the show, but highly recommend people listen to it. The type and the breadth of guests that you have is remarkable. Even though I was nitpicking with you before the show on too many Boston Red Sox, but
I had two actually, 'cause I had Shea
two.
Hillenbrand on the show too. That in itself was a crazy story.
Yeah, and it's awesome. So, and again, we think there's the paths we can look at is, does it make sense to start a podcast? Which you and I would probably say yes, but I think, what I was really intrigued by was the guesting opportunities on podcasts, and
Mhm.
thinking about it as a B2B founder, how do I scale my business? Right.
Yeah.
The default a lot of times, well, I'm going to hire a salesperson. Great,
Mhm.
hand-to-hand combat. You're going to help grow a little bit, but how do you reach people? So, when you started a media company based on guesting, I'm like, perfect. This is something a little bit different, but I would say it is going to become more conventional than maybe what it is. So
Mhm.
maybe a little bit, you could give a little background on, what it is, right? For
Sure.
people that aren't podcasting, then we can get into, kind of your recommendations and best practices on how to do it.
So, what we're really talking about is appearing on other podcasts as a PR strategy because you're getting in front of other audiences that are already established. They're already moving, they already have an awesome host and stuff like that. So you don't have to build an audience from the ground up. And I think that's why it's been so successful, especially for people doing book tours, right? Because they want to get in front of audiences, they want to do it quickly, they want to do stuff like that. So it really helps you to do that rather than saying, okay, it's day one, I'm going to build an audience, I'm going to spend 2 to 3 years doing this, and then eventually, my business will see the success from it. What you're actually doing is you're siphoning a little bit off of other people's audiences to get attention and really building a relationship too, because, a lot of podcasts, people listening to this will know, like, hey, they're anywhere from 30, 45 minutes. If you're Joe Rogan, like 27 hours or whatever the hell he's at now. I'm a big Adam Curry fan. I listened to his podcast called No Agenda, and he was just on Rogan, I think a week ago, and their episode was like 5.5 hours. And I was just like, okay, guys, like, I don't understand what's happening anymore. But anyway, so a lot of podcast episodes are like 30 to 45 minutes. So people are actually building a relationship with you, right? Like anybody that's done radio spots or TV spots knows, like, if you get 6 minutes, that's amazing. Like, that's a
Right.
lot of time. And that's why, like, really building a relationship is something you can do in a podcast medium. And I also want to point out something that you said before, because it's actually a really great point. And you were talking about a lot of B2B founders and how they can actually help their team by going on podcasts. Because what we've actually seen is it doesn't make a lot of sense for your marketing person to go on podcasts and represent your company, or your PR person to go on podcasts and represent companies. It makes sense for the founder to do that. Reason being, they have the company founding story. They have the grit. They built the company. They had the idea. So you're actually telling the story from a firsthand representation and that firsthand experience. So to me, maybe you're removed from the day to day and you're kind of doing more of the managerial stuff, but it makes so much sense for you to be the one going on podcasts because you're creating trust for yourself and trust for your brand, and you're making the job easier for everybody else, those salespeople that are hitting the ground running for you.
Yeah, and I think too, nobody other than the founders, which they don't always understand, can speak with the same enthusiasm and excitement and passion about the business as they can.
Right. Well, it's that too. And it's like, it's different when somebody says, okay, well, I was hired by this company. Cool. Well, you didn't take the risk. You didn't do a lot of the stuff to start it. It's a different flow, man. It really is.
Yeah. No, 100% agree. And, those are the best stories. I listen to podcasts of quite a few different types, but I do like the fact that we have you on the podcast, right? You've got a team. Now we could have put somebody from and say, hey, podcast guesting is a topic and it makes sense. But
Hmm.
coming from somebody that's actually done it and then built, a really big brand out of this, I think, speaks volumes. And people do want to hear the founder story. Where did this come out of left
Yep.
field, or how did you start a, podcast company, right? What was it, early history as your major? So
So my undergrad degree is in Catholic theology, and then my master's degree is in ancient history, more specifically early Roman Empire propaganda. I read this like really, really old article by this Jesuit priest named Father Cuthbert Leahy about people kneeling down and worshiping the body of Alexander the Great. And I'm like, wow, that's really weird and interesting. And what I basically found is the Roman emperors use ruler worship of Alexander the Great to basically, convince people that they needed to worship them for the next 500 years. So that's kind of what I was obsessed with for years in college.
yeah, well, and I think the your interest in those, kind of, it comes out in your podcast as well, right? Because you're
Yeah.
looking for the interesting stories. It's not the cookie cutter, here's the 5 questions we're going to ask and let's get into it. And just the range, like I said, the range of folks that you have on the show is remarkable. So, all right. So now if I'm a founder, I'm like, all right, I can get on board this thing. I want to be a podcast guest. I'm sure there's, you just don't roll out of bed and say, hey, I want to be a podcast guest. What's kind of your recommendations on how to get, now that I'm thinking about, yes, I want to do that.
Mhm.
What's a kind of a recommended approach if it's a DIY, right?
Well, I guess the thing to go with here, since we're talking to a lot of B2B, they may be in a better position than most companies, because most companies also, they don't have like a media page on their site and stuff like that. But companies that are more B2B are already thinking with that. But if you're hearing this and you're not, like, don't feel bad about yourself. Like, it's important to have a page in your site that holds some of your media features and stuff like that, because it does help to enhance your credibility. So like, that's kind of one of the things you should be building first. And if you don't have a lot of that, I tell people to use what's called a small pond strategy. Find these small areas you're a part of. For me, it was a small town, 5/8 of a mile in size. Nothing really happened there. So when I printed a press release and put it in a local newspaper, it ran like unedited. I got to use my own title, all that kind of stuff. And it helped me to get a lot of early media pieces for our company. And I was able to feature a lot of that stuff on the website. So what happens is, once you start reaching out to podcasts and media, you're going to have a higher hit rate, because they've already seen like you're credible and you know what you're doing. So if you already have that in place, great. If you don't, find your small pond. It could be your Rotary Club. It could be the town you're a part of. It could be your university, your lake community, whatever it is, and get some of those to start running some articles about you. One of the best articles I've read on press releases, just Google the word HubSpot and press release, and it'll kind of walk you through how to write a good one, because you need news that's newsworthy. So that's kind of the first thing, is you need your early credibility to show people that you matter and that you've done media before. Because especially with more seasoned podcasts, they're going to care to see like, what have you done before? And, how do you deliver yourself in that? So that credibility is important. The second thing is finding out like, who are the exact type of people that you need to talk to in terms of a podcast audience. Like, not every show is going to work for every single person. Right. And at the same time, like, don't get, overwhelmed by vanity metrics. Because a lot of people hear this and they're like, oh, I need to be on the show with 1 million downloads, and I want to be on Joe Rogan, and I want to be on Tim Ferriss. And it's like, great. Well, if your audience doesn't listen to those shows, I'm sorry. It's just about vanity for you. Right. So you need to find out where your audience is, who do they listen to, and, what's going to be the most important places to go. After that, the really thing you want to work out is something that we call story, message, call to action. Your personal story, your brand message, which is usually 3 to 5 key teachable things that you can talk about and be flexible on. Like, you don't get on there and just start, doing your spiel. Like, it needs to be something flexible and in answers to the questions you're listening to, right. But it's your message. And then the call to action is the action you want people to take at the end. So I always recommend, even before you start reaching out, you figure out what that looks like for yourself. The more times you interview and the more times you go through it, you're going to feel a little bit better about it. But then when you're writing a pitch, meaning like the email or phone call or whatever it is that you're going to use to reach out to these shows, you're going to talk about your story, because it creates credibility, right? Like, people can see you've done it. And that's why I said the founder story is important. Your message, which is what you have to deliver for the audience, not, I want my audience to buy your book. I got an email like that once, and I'm like, dude, you're kidding me, right? Like, I'm sure you want my audience to buy your book, but that's not a good reason for us to talk. So you want to talk about like what's in it for the audience. That's really, 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 really important, because this is more of an educational platform. There has to be a reason people want to listen to you. And then once you kind of have those things down, I always recommend people start reaching out to smaller shows. And I have really found email to be the best way to do it. When I say smaller shows, I mean like less than 20 episodes, less than 20 reviews and stuff like that. Because number one, the audience is going to be smaller. So if you're getting your feet wet and you're kind of learning, it's not going to be as stressful, and, you and the host are both going to feel good about it. And you're going to have an easier chance of getting those. And as you kind of get more and more and more of those under your belt, you can start approaching larger shows, maybe over 100 reviews and over 100 episodes and stuff like that. But you want to kind of start with that smaller level to get your feet wet. Because I think one of the things people don't always realize is like, oh, I'm well known in my space, and I'm blah, 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 blah. I'm Joe Awesome or whatever it is. And it's like, that's great. But in the podcast space and in the media space, you may not be known. And that's why you still have to kind of start at that base level and build yourself up so that people can see how cool and how great you are.
Yeah, it's such a good point. I'm glad you stressed on the value to the audience piece, because I do think too many people don't pay attention to that. And even as a podcast host, I remind myself every time, what's the audience going to get out of this, right? It's the value. And when people ask me about starting a podcast, I'm like, you cannot make it about you as much as you.
I did that, man, and it was trash. My first podcast was called Rock Your Life, and I tried to like be a life coach or something like that. It was so bad. And honestly, the thing that I've always tried to work on as an interviewer, and it took a long time to learn how to do it, is you learn how to ask questions from the viewpoint of the person listening. because you want to figure out what value can I pull out for the people that are listening to me. And it takes some work to kind of learn that, but you can create some great content for the person that's, spending some time and giving you, their earballs for this.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And listening is still a skill, right? That forced to, and I'm getting better at it as I go through my journey on this, but it is because I think that's where the value from the podcast comes, is that dialogue and not just, a pitch and that type of thing. The one thing I wanted to go back a little bit, because you
Sure.
talked about the vanity metrics, and I'd love to get your perspective on this because, like my journey to where I'm at now. So podcast host is one, but, I
Hmm.
spent a good portion of my corporate or my career in the corporate side. So I've got a lot of people that are, VPs of sales, VPs of
Sure.
marketing. And so my LinkedIn network is a little bit different. And, when I talk, or when guests who I'm going to have on the program ask about, reach, I promote all three aspects. Like, look, you're
Hmm.
going to get it on the podcast. I hit it heavy on LinkedIn. So you've got a very diverse group and engaged group on there, and then Twitter and some of the other pieces. And I think, to your point on the vanity metrics, you want to hit the folks that are going to care about you and your product, right?
Yes.
So I think that's underappreciated sometimes.
Well, I think one of the things with that too that a lot of people don't get is like appearing on a podcast is a PR action. As much as you want it to be marketing and you may get some sales, you may get some leads, you most likely will if you're doing a good job, but it is a PR action, right? You're creating that know, like, and trust factor so that everything else you do works better. What I think people fail to think is they're looking at it. If I get in front of this number of people, this number will go to the opt-in page, this number will convert. Well, you're missing the really big variable, and that's like, what if you suck? If you suck, you could get in front of 10 million people that don't go to your landing page and don't convert and don't call you. So like that's the thing you really have to understand is, as much as people want to make appearing on a podcast or running a podcast a marketing action, it is primarily a PR or public relations action. It is creating a know, like, and trust factor. Now, if you're getting your story, message, and call to action down, you can make it work more towards your marketing, and that's great. And that means when you're sending people to a certain landing page, you're pixeling that landing page so you can retarget the people at that page. And, you're setting up really cool software I use called getemails.com that can actually retarget people and opt them into your email list too that have been to those sites. But it is primarily a PR action. So getting in front of a million people, if they're the wrong million people, aren't going to help you. Like if you
Right.
show up and you don't show up to help, it's not going to help you. So that's why I feel like I've been banging the drum for this forever, talking to a lot of marketing people. Like, this is primarily a PR action. They're like, oh, well, I need to be in front of 10,000 people and I need to be in da 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 da. And it's like, that's great, but I can't promise you those 10,000 people are going to be people that convert. Now, they may be the right people to create trust and bring in other opportunities and make your other marketing convert better and make more people know about you, which is really important. But it is not a marketing action.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. And I do think I've started to rediscover the value of PR. I'm not doing it much myself,
Right.
but I know there's a lot of opportunity. Just you said in the local market, right? You
Yeah.
pick up 5 people there, then there's another 10, and the momentum just starts to build.
Well,
And
here's a great example of that too. Like, we had two people we work with, both on the same podcast. One person said it was the greatest podcast he's ever been on. They did $50,000 in sales directly from the podcast. The other person said that podcast sucked and they wanted another one to replace it.
no, interesting.
So it's not the podcast, and that's why it's important to take a look at how you're talking about this stuff and how you're working about this stuff. Is you want to understand you need to show up to be helpful, to be awesome, to be educational, and to really help, and it'll create some awesome results for you. But you can't expect to be effective of it, right? You have to be effective with
Right.
it.
Yeah, that's such a good point. And, one of the things I preach a lot is, you can't force people down the buying path anymore,
Yep.
right? There's, people who are going to be ready. You're timely in front of them. You may opportunistically get it, but, and I like to share my super simplistic look is, right, when founders start the business, a lot of them I find, and even the ones that have scaled the business, they sell successfully into their network.
Hmm.
Longer they've been in business, the bigger the network, the bigger the initial run of revenue. But they all get stalled at that point.
Yep.
And when they break through to get to people, and again, super simple, the people that don't know you and have a problem, right? And then there's people that maybe know you but don't realize they have the problem. And so
Hmm.
it's, awareness and education that can be really hard to reach new eyeballs. And that's
Yeah.
why I think the value of doing a lot of this is, hey, you're planting the seed, and if you do a good job with the right content, when they're ready,
Hmm.
they're going to be thinking of you versus instant gratification, right? I'm on the podcast, buy from me now. right?
Right.
So
Well, it's even the trust factor, right? Like even as a host, like I'm sure there's people that, they've listened to all 75 episodes that you've had and, they would say, "Hey, Brett recommends this. I'm going to go check this out." So like that trust factor is so invaluable and you can't put a CPM on that or you can't put a number on that. And so that's why you really have to show up to create trust because an audience sees right through it. And that's why
right.
the podcasts are such a cool and interesting medium is it can do so much for you if you show up as somebody willing to share and help. If you just show up as somebody kind of like looking to get your leads and sales, it's probably not going to work for you if that's your only purpose.
Right. Yeah. Audience isn't going to listen and you're not going to get the impact out of it that you want. So I guess that's good. Maybe a little bit of a segue into, we talked about think about the value that you want to
Sure.
add. Make sure you listen to the show once before, at least one episode before you're
Make
on
sure you
it.
use
So
the right show name.
yeah, we talked a little bit offline that I still have pitches that come in with the old show title. So it's to pay attention to the details, right? It's a very
Yeah.
personalized business. We're trying to get people to be more personal. So, from an outreach perspective, have you used or is LinkedIn a possible platform to connect with people? Or you had mentioned that email is still highly effective.
Well, so it depends because like a lot of times our team, one of the first things they'll use is email, but they use phone to call offices and see if they get in touch with people. They use social media to do a lot of different things. See, the thing is you have to realize how resourceful are you willing to be if you really want to be on a show. And maybe it's emailing for that show. Like we have certain shows that want to be reached out to via Voxer. I know very few people that use Voxer, but it's the important thing of realizing you know, where does that person want to receive your communication and how is going to make
Right.
easier for them. And if it's more work on your end, but you're going to get an awesome, conversation and an awesome podcast, then, be willing to do it. So you just have to also understand like what type of communication does that person want to receive? Is it WhatsApp? Is it Signal? Maybe they're worried the government's spying on them or something. Like whatever it is to make it easier for you to communicate to them, show up where they want you, not make them go where you want because they're not going to go.
Yeah, yeah, it's gonna be a losing proposition if you, you go that way for sure. Yeah, and kind of a side note, it's been interesting as I've listened to podcasts and I consume a lot of podcasts. I'll reach out to guests that I hear on different podcasts and just
Mhm.
say, "Hey, man, I really enjoyed, the conversation, and thank you for sharing it." And I probably get 95% acceptance rate, regardless of
Wow.
how big or small or where they're at. And
Mhm.
again, I'm not asking for anything other than saying thank you. It'd be great to be part of the network. Occasionally, I've got a number of guests that way
Mhm.
where I've heard somewhere else and I thought maybe they could add value to the network. But yeah, I think your point is really well taken on being resourceful.
Well, even like public figures, like you and I were talking about our love for baseball, and I know as a Cubs fan, I could give you a discount on Gary Sanchez if you want it, but he's pretty bad this year. But I've had a lot of success, like especially with athletes, like getting in touch with them on Instagram. Believe it or not,
Oh,
like
interesting.
I had Johnny Damon, Nick Swisher, and I've had a few AJ Hawk. I've had a lot of these guys come from Instagram, and that's where they want to communicate. So it's also understanding like if you are more of a B2B market, LinkedIn's going to be your place, man. A lot of
Yeah.
B2B people like live on LinkedIn. So you want to figure out what that place is going to be. I had General David Petraeus on the show, the former CIA director. I got him through LinkedIn. I sent him a LinkedIn message and that's how we got it booked. So, figure out where your market lives and where your market calls home and communicate to them there, man.
And no spam, be personal, please, right
Oh
now.
my God. Yeah.
All right. So I mean, this is good. I know take us off topic a little bit, but,
Yeah.
so we're now a guest. We appeared on somebody's podcast.
Sure.
We don't leave it there, right? There's some probably best practices after the episode airs.
Yeah.
What would you recommend kind of post episode?
Well, number one, as a host, you'll appreciate this. Definitely share it. Like, it doesn't make sense to me to go on a podcast and not do anything with it. Like, what's the point? It's like going into somebody's house and saying, "All right, where's my dinner?" And make sure you do the dishes for me after I leave. Like what the hell? Why would you do that? So, number one is make sure you share it. Like, do the work to show you support them because that really matters. Number two is if you took the time to really, really connect with that person, one of the things I like to do is I like to share like opportunities that may come my way with certain people after that. I try to, network with them after. Like, oh, I was connected with an astrophysicist recently, really cool dude. And I knew him in another podcast I would on would connect so well. So, I do that connection. Whatever it is that you think you can do to add value to that person's life after, if you guys have a great connection, continue to, foster that. Like, it's not just the podcast is over and done with. It's an incredible networking opportunity, an incredible time to spend time with someone that you may not always have access to. So that's why you want to do that. Like I had somebody on, 4 years ago now, and I found an obscure blog post where he said how much he really enjoyed G.K. Chesterton and C.S. Lewis. I collect old and obscure books. You may not know that. So
Uh,
I actually have a 1938 copy of War and Peace, which is interesting because it's the year World War II started. But I had a anthology of G.K. Chesterton literature that was over 100 years old. So I actually sent it to this guy. I mean, he was like super, super appreciative. We've connected a bunch since. We've, chatted a bunch since. He's helped me with some stuff. So it's like, you want to figure out what can you do to continue to foster that connection and what's special for that person. Like, don't just be like, oh, here's a copy of my book. If he's got a podcast, he's probably getting 50 other books that are just like yours. And, you're going to do what I did the other day. All right, here's the 50 books I didn't want that I got. What am I going to do with these? So you want to figure out what can you do that's unique to that person that you continue to build that relationship with, because it is an incredible networking tool, like with this person you're getting to spend time with.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. And maybe it just took time with the podcast for me to start to learn and appreciate. And I do that. I do try to connect and stay in touch with most of the folks, and then connect other people that have been on the
Yeah.
podcast. And it just becomes kind of the network effect. No pun intended with that.
And here's the thing, like, you shouldn't do things to expect things, but some
Right.
amazing things will come your way when you operate like that. Like, I just had Dave Rubin on my show from Rubin Report, and that came in from a referral from somebody that I just really hit it off with as a guest, and we've just kind of helped people out, helped each other out since then. And he's like, hey, would you like to interview Dave Rubin? I'm like, yes. So like, it's at the same time, like, creating those relationships will create incredible opportunities. Now, you should never give with the hope of receiving,
Right.
but if you just kind of give to help, some things will come your way. It's just, reciprocal.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in karma, right? Do the right thing,
Yeah.
it'll come back and pay you back. One of my favorite quotes is from, I'm sure you would never, well, I don't know, a lot of facts. Iowa State's football coach, Matt Campbell, he came to, Iowa State, which is a tough place to win football games. And
That's a great wrestling school, man. I wrestled in school.
okay, so then you can appreciate at least that aspect of it. And as he's starting to build, he's preaching to these players as they're building is, man, you got to appreciate the process and trust the process and love the process. And someday the process is going to love you back, and they're starting to reap some of it. And I just think that's so important as, do, like I said, expect nothing thereof, right? It's like, this is fun. I'm glad I can help. I'll do anything I can help you somewhere, somehow. If something comes back, great. If not, I feel better that I've helped somebody. So
Absolutely.
took a long time to figure that out in life, right? But
Yeah.
better late than never. So, all right, awesome. And one of the things I think, even as I've guessed I could do a better job is I'll promote it, but I'd love to get your perspective. And this is part selfish on my part is, hey, I appeared on somebody else's, podcast. And if I looked at LinkedIn, they provide the image. Is there kind of a recommendation that you had? So you're just not sharing it and say, hey, thanks for the opportunity, which you absolutely should do. But how do you get the most out of that appearance when you're posting that episode?
So I'm going to just preface this by first saying, like, I don't always do this because we do get busy, and I apologize when I don't to, people out there listening if I have been on your show, but I try to do the best job possible with this. Is number one, like, just don't post a link and say, here's my podcast episode with blah, blah, blah. Like, people don't know anything about it. Like, you need to add context. And as much as I do, like, the thing that does the best on LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is one of our best traffic platforms, is storytelling. Like, is there a story you can tell from that interview specifically? And honestly, like, I'll get off some interviews and I'll be like, just so excited about it. Like, and a story we told that I'll write that story ahead of time. So like, I was on a podcast where I was on a 2.5-hour podcast interview where I got to talk about Greek philosophy and why I'm so interested in the Condottiere Cesare Borgia. So I had a great story to tell about that. And that's what you want to really find out, is what kind of stories can I tell about this is going to create people's interest. Also realize at the same time, platforms like LinkedIn don't like when you share links. So you have to figure out how you can creatively share them. So one of the things I'll do is at the bottom, maybe I'll have an image or whatever, but at the bottom I'll say the link is in the first comment, because any of these platforms will downrank anything that's a link because they don't want you to leave. They want you to stay and just consume some more stuff. So you have to also at the same time know the rules of the game of the places you're sharing. So I've just found that link and comments tends to be the best way to do that for me when you're telling a story. And I'll tell you, man, like, I find writing my content for LinkedIn versus writing it for Facebook just to be a little bit harder, because that 1,300 characters sometime, man, can be hard. And then I'll write it and you get the red where it says you're 100 characters over. I got to go back and I say, okay, I can get rid of the word and replace it with an and sign. So you try and figure out how to make that story work. But, tell the best story you can that grabs somebody's attention and keeps them reading for 1,300 characters.
Yeah, 100%. One of the things I've been playing with and haven't gone all in and a number of builds is video, right? Little short video
I had
snippet.
found the video hasn't worked as well recently. I don't know if you know Dennis Brown, but he and I are in a mastermind together, and we were talking about this recently. Like the way video reacts on these platforms, on LinkedIn especially, has changed a lot recently. I don't know why that is, but a lot of pure text posts actually seem to be doing a lot better right now. It's interesting because it kind of goes through like phases, right? 3 years ago, it was just pure text posts. And I think BuzzFeed even did an article on this guy named Josh Fector that was one of the first ones to do it, who's now gotten kicked off of the platform because of a lot of the interesting stuff he was doing. But they called it broetry. You'd write a long form story and kind of try and link it somewhere or something like that. So that was doing really well. And then the platform brought in video, and that did incredibly well. And then I could go out and just repost a Goalcast video and get 100,000 views on it. Now, if you're getting 1,200 views, like that's incredible. So I think the platform changes a lot. And now we're back to this idea of just write a great pure text post and you're going to get more engagement that way. And, I'm getting anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 views on something like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think you're right. That's what I'm become much more natural writing at the alt text versus that. So I'm glad that it's
it can be harder. And you got to think about like how the posts are structured too. Like you get 3 lines before that little see more button. So those 3 lines are really important. Like this is a couple years ago, but I had a guy on that was, he won a silver medal for Canada in the Olympics as a swimmer. So I was like, okay, well, I'm going to do something interesting here. So I had the percentage of people of the population that were ever be in the Olympics and the percentage of those that would ever win a medal. So I had an intense number of views on this post because people were very interested to click that see more button. So you got to realize that real estate, those 3 lines are really, really important to get people engaged into the rest of the story.
It's almost like the headline, even though you don't.
It is, yeah.
For, right? Interesting.
And you get more than a typical headline, which is nice because, like if email headline, man, if you try and do 9 words, that's a lot of words because those 3 little ellipses in most people's email programs are going to appear long before that.
Yeah, no, such a good point. That's great advice for all, not just the podcast guesting, but just if you're using LinkedIn, I think it makes sense. And maybe to close out this section before I get to my last 2 questions for you.
Sure.
What are some of the top mistakes that folks made? I think we've covered, a little bit of what to do, but what are some of the common things that you see founders or all guests for that matter do when they podcast or post podcasts that definitely don't do?
I had a guest on that actually did not run the interview, and he was somewhat famous, but I'll leave his name out of this. And he did his interview outside on his phone with no headphones with airplanes flying all around. And it was kind of like, I'd ask him a question and be like, it was like the parents in Charlie Brown. So like it was an absolute, horrible interview. I stopped myself from swearing there. It was a horrible interview. And when I asked him, like, hey man, like halfway through the interview, would you mind like at least going inside so we can kind of like rescue this thing? And he goes, well, if you had a good editor, this wouldn't be a problem. And I'm like, any editor worth their salt knows that the sound file sucks. You have a lot of chance of not having a good interview. So I ended up not publishing it. So number 1, like take the time, even if it's just earbuds, to think about the environment you're in when you're doing an interview and kind of respect the person's podcast you're being on. They're giving you time. They're doing whatever. Most people aren't going to be forgiving where they say, hey, can we reschedule this and redo it? They're just going to say, wow, this is crap. I'm never going to call that person again. Right. So you want to take that level of responsibility. And that's really, really, really important. The other thing too is, we kind of already hit on it, but put the audience first, man. Remember what is in it for them, what's not in it for you. It's really, really important because a lot of times if a host doesn't see it, if they're interested enough, but they don't see what's in it in the audience, they'll say, okay, well, what is my audience going to learn from this? So you have to really, really, really keep that first and foremost in front of mind. It's got to be valuable to somebody. So like, those are the things you really, really, really have to be aware of. And also at the same time, I know it's a simple thing, but knowing what platform it's on. Like, let's say you've never used Zoom before. Do a quick test call with somebody. I tend to use something called Squadcast for a lot of my interviews, but it runs only in Chrome. So like you need to like know a lot of these things because somebody will say, hold on, I'm downloading Chrome and their internet connection is slow. So it takes 20 minutes. And I'm like, I really need to reschedule this now. So like, just know a lot of the basics, of that interview before you're going to jump in. And honestly, other than that, man, if you're just showing up and willing to talk to the audience, there's not that much to really mess up on.
Yeah, be yourself, right? I think transparent and honest goes a long way. And I think that's a good point on the quality. I didn't think about that because people are going to judge you one way or the other based on, the overall. And people are forgiving,
Yeah. It doesn't need to sound like NPR or something like that, man. But like if it's difficult to listen to, that is always the first barrier and you're going to lose people there.
Right. Turn off your email dings and notifications and those things you don't get.
Yeah.
Right. Right. I mean, and then
Bong,
I think always
bong.
circle
Which
iPad
is the
one of those.
greatest thing about a MacBook, by the way. I learned this last year and I thought it was magical, but apparently it's been there for a long time, is there's do not disturb mode. So like all of your pings and bongs and whatever the heck it is that you get, like don't happen. It's pretty cool.
And did you know on Chrome you can mute sites too that you may have notifications? So up on the tab you can right click like LinkedIn, when you get either a message or notification that sometimes will ping, you can actually mute the site. So you still get it, but it doesn't make any noise. I'm like, did not know that until about 3 weeks ago.
Awesome.
So, all right. So Jeremy, really, really appreciate your time. But I'm going to close with two questions. One, what's next for you and the team? What are you guys focused on here in the next few months?
So actually, we're doing a crowdfunding book launch, and the raise starts on Monday, which I'm really, really excited for that. So we're basically doing a pre-raise before we actually do the book, which is really exciting. That's kind of like top of mind right now. We've also been working on, we've been working with a company called Clients and Community, which are really awesome to grow our Facebook group and really use that as more of a client getting engine. So shout out to those guys over there, Chris Stapleton, Jaden Easton, all those guys, they're really doing an awesome job. So we've been working on that. So really that's what we're working on is we've got a couple big programs that are getting a lot of my attention right now. And that's what I'm most excited about.
Awesome. And last but not least, I ask every guest the same question. What is one thing that you would highly recommend? No pressure.
Don't drink milk on a hot day. Thinking of that scene from Anchorman. Oh, it's hot. Milk was a bad choice. You know what, man? No, I would say this, and I feel like a lot of your founders on here would know this, but at the same time, anything you want in life or anything you want in your business is going to take a lot more work than you realize. So understand that, estimate more effort than you think you're going to need to take, and just go for it, man.
Yeah, that's such good advice. And I will leave in, don't drink milk on a hot day because
It's hot. Milk was a bad choice.
We were talking a little bit offline. One of the highlights, if you haven't seen Anchorman, go see it. Going back a little bit, how old is that movie now? 5 years, 10 years old? Probably.
Oh gosh, I don't even. What year did Anchorman publish? Because there was a second one even. It was a long time ago, man.
Hopefully in the 2010s.
Like maybe like 2009, maybe.
Yeah.
Anchorman 2 came out in 2013.
Oh yeah.
If you're ready to feel old, Anchorman came out in 2004.
Whoa. 10 years ago. That's crazy. Okay. Yeah, I do feel old now. Thank you for that. Again, Jeremy, thank you very much for your time. I highly recommend if you love podcasts, check it out. It's Create Your Own Life podcast. You find it on his website, any of the platforms. And then I guess I was going to steal your thunder, but if people do want to reach out,
yeah,
what's the best place to connect with you?
Well, we've talked a lot about PR, creating trust, getting the right media and stuff like that today. And honestly, I don't want people to make the same mistakes I did because, if you run your head into the wall 27 times, it's probably not going to break in the 28th. So I put together a really awesome white paper for everybody on here called the 7 Reasons You're Not Getting Booked in Your Favorite Podcasts. And it's going to help you really get set up in the right way to, whether you want to get on podcasts or harness the right media, it's going to help you do all that. So it's over at commandyourbrand.com/7 reasons, and the word 7 or the number 7 works for that.
Smart, and that's clever. And we'll link to that in the show notes as well. And I also highly encourage people to check out your blog and your content. There's a lot of really good content out there. So if you're thinking about doing your own podcast, guesting on podcasts, Jeremy's got you covered there. So Jeremy, again, thank you. And once the book comes out, maybe we can get you back on to talk about that and keep tabs with you. And let me know when we get the first Cubs guest on there.
Hey, man, maybe I'll get the Yankees closer on. He was a Cub for like 10 minutes.
Oh, Chapman, he won a World Series. So quality of the person or not, you can be your own judge. But if you separate performance from, the personal, sometimes it's easier. We can have a whole different discussion on that, though. All right, Jared, have a great rest of your day. Appreciate it. And take care. Stay healthy.
All right. Thanks, brother.
Thanks.